We're here at Hong Kong harbour at dawn, the sun casting a golden glow on the calm waters of the harbour. The hum of the city in this early morning hour fills the air. It's been a few years since I was in Hong Kong, but the memories come back fast. You know, Hong Kong is a beacon of modernity, and it's a crossroads of the past and the future. And here in this city-state in the southern coast of China, history is alive. Hong Kong's a city-state located, as I said, in the southern coast of China. It's one of the most important financial centres in the world, and it's known for its bustling harbour, skyline, and rich cultural heritage. Hong Kong has such a rich history, and it begins nearly 5,000 years ago when early settlers harnessed the land and the sea. And its history spans over 5,000 years. The city's been under the rule of several dynasties, going back in time, including the Song, the Yuan, the Ming, the Qing. And in the 19th century, Hong Kong was ceded to the British Empire, and it remained under British rule until 1997, when it was handed back to China. And in this episode, we'll explore the history of Hong Kong from the ancient times to the crazy, exciting present day. The earliest evidence of human habitation in Hong Kong dates back to the Neolithic era, around 5000 BC. Archaeological excavations have revealed that the people who lived in Hong Kong during this period were skilled in fishing, hunting and farming. They also produced pottery and stone tools for various purposes. During the Han Dynasty, 206 BC, Hong Kong was part of the Beiyu Kingdom. The Han Dynasty established a trade route that connected Hong Kong to other parts of China. And this trade route helped increase the prosperity of the area generally. And then there was the Middle Ages. From the Han Dynasty's burgeoning trade routes connecting the vast empire of China, to the Tang Dynasty, when Hong Kong began its ascent as a hub of culture and commerce. In the Tang Dynasty, which was 618 to 907 AD, Hong Kong became part of the Guangzhou prefecture. And during this period, the city began to develop as a trading centre. Merchants from all over China and other parts of the world came to Hong Kong to trade silk, ceramics, to 1279 AD, Hong Kong became part of the Southern Song Dynasty, and the city continued to develop as a trading centre, and the population grew rapidly. The Song Dynasty also established a naval base in Hong Kong, which helped to protect the city from pirates. In the Yuan Dynasty, 1271 to 1368 AD, Hong Kong became part of the Mongol Empire, and the Mongols continued to develop Hong Kong as a trading centre, and the city became an important hub between China and other parts of the world. Then in the Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644 AD, Hong Kong became part of the Guangdong province, and during this period the city continued to develop as a trading centre, and it became an important centre for the production of ceramics. In the Qing dynasty, 1644 to 1911 AD, Hong Kong became part of the Guangdong province, and the Qing dynasty established a customs office in Hong Kong, helped to regulate trade and increase the revenue of the government. And then there was the British rule. As they say, with power comes envy, conflict and change. And the British Empire, in the wake of the Opium War, imposing its will with the Treaty of Nanking, forever altering Hong Kong's destiny. In 1839, the Opium War broke out between China and Britain. And the war was caused by Britain's illegal trade in opium, which was damaging the Chinese economy. In 1842, the Treaty of Nanking was signed, which ceded Hong Kong to the British. Hong Kong became a British colony, and the British established a naval base in the city. Under British rule, Hong Kong again flourished. There was infrastructure, law and order. A new world built atop of the old. And under British rule, Hong Kong developed rapidly. The British introduced modern infrastructure such as roads and railways and telegraph lines. They also established a legal system, a police force and a civil service. Hong Kong became an important centre for trade and finance, and the city's population grew rapidly.
En audaz avance, las fuerzas armadas japonesas ocupan el territorio de Kowloon, frente a Hong Kong. Las formaciones británicas se retiran a la isla.
Yet not all change brought progress. World War II brought occupation, suffering, and the Japanese.
Para evitar un inútil derramamiento de sangre, el comandante japonés exige la capitulación de Hong Kong.
And Hong Kong played a significant role in World War II, as it was occupied by the Japanese forces from December 1941 to August 1945, when Japan surrendered. The period of Japanese occupation was a time of great hardship and suffering for the peoples of Hong Kong. And they endured food shortages, disease, forced labour, and all kinds of other forms of mistreatment. Prior to the Japanese invasion, Hong Kong was a British colony with a population of around 600,000 people. And the British had been preparing for a possible Japanese attack since the outbreak of war in Europe in 1939. But they were ill prepared for the scale and the ferocity of the Japanese assault that happened on December 8, 1941. The Japanese forces attacked from the north, and despite valiant resistance from the British and Canadian troops, they were quickly overwhelmed, and the defenders lost as the Japanese captured the city. The Japanese occupation of Hong Kong was marked by brutal repression and a disregard for any kinds of human rights. The occupiers implemented a policy of forced labour and led to the deaths of thousands of Chinese civilians who were forced to work on construction projects and other tasks under appalling conditions. Food shortages were also a major problem during the occupation, as the Japanese confiscated food and supplies and imposed strict rationing. The lack of adequate nutrition led to widespread malnutrition, disease and death. Many people were forced to scavenge for food, and cases of cannibalism were reported in some areas. The occupation also had a profound impact on the city's economy and social fabric. The Japanese confiscated property and businesses, and many people lost their homes and livelihoods. The education system was also disrupted and many schools were closed. The Japanese also imposed a strict censorship regime, which limited the freedom of speech and expression. Resistance to the Japanese occupation was widespread, with many Hong Kong people joining the underground resistance movements and engaging in acts of sabotage and guerrilla warfare. The British and Canadian prisoners of war also played a significant role in the resistance efforts, with many of them escaping from internment camps and joining the guerrilla fighters in the hills. The end of the war in August 1945 marked the end of the Japanese occupation of Hong Kong. The city was liberated by British and Canadian forces, but the legacy of the occupation remained. The war had a profound impact on the city's people and infrastructure, and it took many years for Hong Kong to recover from the devastation of the occupation.
Much longer to paint their signatures on the document, possibly to delay the inevitable disgrace of surrendering their swords. Admiral Harcourt winds up the proceedings with his own signature, making an official end to Hong Kong's years of suffering. The jobs of clearing up, particularly the dirtier jobs, are very rightly reserved for the sons of heaven, who are given no chance to think.
So in conclusion, the Japanese occupation of Hong Kong during World War II was a time of great hardship and suffering for the city's people. The occupation had a profound impact on the city's economy, its social fabric and culture. And as I said, it took many years for the city to recover. And despite the brutality of the repression, the occupiers and the people of Hong Kong showed remarkable resilience and resistance. And their bravery and courage is still remembered and honoured to today.
Blaze of colour from thousands of ceremonial banners, many of them carefully hidden from the Japanese during the bitter years of occupation.
After the war, Hong Kong faced the colossal task of reconstruction. The city, undaunted by the occupation, began to rebuild.
South to Hong Kong, where the former Japanese garrison is put to work in the same prison camp in which Allied prisoners were tortured and starved. Now the tables are turned. No kid-glove methods are used by the tough Indian troops who overlook their work. Everything must be done at the double and at the bayonet point, the sort of language the Japanese know only too well.
In the 1950s, as refugees flooded in from mainland, escaping political upheaval, Hong Kong's resilience was tested once more. After World War II, Hong Kong returned to British control, and the city continued to develop rapidly, and its economy grew at an unprecedented rate. Hong Kong became an important centre for manufacturing, finance and trade. And in the 1950s, Hong Kong faced a major challenge as tens of thousands of refugees arrived from mainland China. And these refugees were fleeing the communist government, which had come to power in 1949. And the influx of refugees put a strain on Hong Kong's resources, and the government struggled to provide basic services for all the new arrivals.
3 million. Even the new buildings are not enough, and still more and more Chinese pour in. So great is the press on dwelling space that shanty towns house a great many. And anyway, they hope to graduate to the apartment houses eventually. The latest arrivals often depend for food on charity organizations. 25,000 people are registered at the Bishop Ford Food Center, a Catholic relief service. Small wonder that one of the best-loved men working among the refugees is Father Howard True. It has been said that many people from the mainland are undesirables, some even criminal. But making allowance for that, the great majority come to Hong Kong to escape tyranny.
Yet despite this, prosperity ensued, and the city transformed into a manufacturing powerhouse, known particularly for its textiles and electronics. Despite these challenges, Hong Kong continued to prosper. And in the 1960s and 1970s, as I said, the manufacturing industry grew greatly. Hong Kong became world famous for its textile and electronics and toy production. The city became a hub for shipping and logistics thanks to its strategic location. As the 1980s marked the countdown to the end of an era, anxiety mingled with anticipation. The one country, two systems promise was made. Hong Kong was to return to China, maintaining its legal and economic autonomy. And in the 1980s, Hong Kong faced a new challenge as the end of the British rule approached. The British government had agreed to hand over Hong Kong to China in 1997 under the aforementioned one country, two systems arrangement. And this meant that Hong Kong would become a part of China but would retain its own legal and economic system. Many people in Hong Kong were worried about the handover. They feared that China might not respect Hong Kong's autonomy and that the city's freedom and prosperity could be at risk. However, the handover went smoothly and Hong Kong continued to thrive under the Chinese rule. The turn of the millennium brought new challenges. There was the SARS outbreak that shook the city to its core. And the Umbrella Revolution showed the world Hong Kong's unyielding call for democracy. And it was in 2019, protesters took to the streets in tens of thousands, clashing with police. In 2019, the city's soul was again tested as the streets became battlegrounds for freedom and autonomy. These major protests this time were in response to a proposed extradition bill. The bill would have allowed people in Hong Kong to be extradited to mainland China, where they could face trial under China's legal system. And many people in Hong Kong feared that the bill would erode the city's autonomy and freedom. And the protests grew into a wider pro-democracy movement. The protests were met with a harsh response from the Hong Kong government and the Chinese government. Police used tear gas, rubber bullets and other tactics to disperse the protesters. Many protesters were arrested and some were charged with serious offences. The protests continued for months but eventually died down due to COVID-19 pandemic and increased government repression. Since the handover, Hong Kong has faced several challenges. In 2003, there was the outbreak of acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, which had a major impact on the economy and public health. In 2014, Hong Kong experienced the pro-democracy protest movement, known as the Umbrella Revolution, and the protesters demanded greater political freedoms and greater autonomy for Hong Kong. Through it all though, Hong Kong endures, a city that refuses to dim its lights, a city whose history is written by the brave. Today, Hong Kong faces new challenges, including tensions with China and the aftermath of the protests. However, the city's people remain committed to preserving its unique identity and way of life, and to building a brighter future for themselves and their children.
In 80 Days, adventurer and award-winning filmmaker Paul G. Roberts retraces the global footsteps of Phileas Fogg, hero of Jules Verne's most famous work,